What's going on, everybody? Kim Becker and Cody Rourke here with your Denver Broncos AMA, brought to you by Mile High Sports. A lot of rumors swirling around this team, of course, with the head coaching position. That's pretty much the biggest topic that Cody and I will be discussing today. But thank you all so much for sending in your questions for Cody. He's got a lot of insight and a lot of opinions, I'm sure, but I'm excited to get this one going because, Cody, the last time we did this, we were hoping we would know who the head coach would be for next season by the next time we sat down and did this AMA. That is not the case, but it seems like this team is definitely taking their time. I know you wrote a great article about the patience of the ownership right now and what it means over at milehighsports.com. So all of you listening, please make sure that you go over there and check it out. But of course, thanks for tuning into this one. And we'll get going with this first question because there's some questions surrounding Jerry Rosburg as well. So this first one is, do you see Jerry Rosburg's request to be interviewed while DeMeco Ryans is still in the playoffs with the way that the team is taking its time? It seems like they could sneak in that interview. What do you think, Cody?
Well, I don't think that Jerry Rosburg will get like an interview. So he had, to my understanding from what I've been told, he had an end of the season meeting with Broncos ownership, Greg Penner, general manager George Payton. They sat down and Jerry just kind of outlined if he were to be considered for the job, these are some of the things that he would do leading into next year. I mean, obviously with how you would lead a roster, how you would emphasize personnel, what you would put on your coaches, things like that. They had that kind of meeting. And look, I think let's say the Broncos, by the time we're recording this, right? So, we're recording this AMA, by the time it premieres, so much could change, right? We could have breaking news out of nowhere. So I just want to say this is a pre-recorded AMA that will premiere live a little bit later on in the day. I wouldn't be shocked in the slightest. Let's say the Broncos' top candidate is a guy like Sean Payton. They miss out on him. I would not be shocked if Denver just kind of said, you know what? We're going to hit a fallback for a year. We're going to reevaluate. We're going to have Jerry Rosburg lead the team this upcoming year. Ejiro Evero, if he doesn't get offered a head coaching job for another team, continue to get him some more experience, and then maybe look to just promote within Ejiro Evero as the head coach maybe next year or 2 years from now. But that seems like, when you think about it, seems like, oh yeah, that's not going to happen. That's not realistic. Well, I don't think it's going to happen. I think there's always a chance that something like that could happen. But Jerry Rosburg may have some sort of role on the team at some point, depending on who is brought in as the next head coach. Now, in terms of DeMeco Ryans, the Broncos cannot interview him a second time until after the NFC Championship game concludes. So obviously we know the 49ers and the Eagles this upcoming weekend is going to be a big game in the NFC Championship. After that, Denver can interview him a second time. So it doesn't seem like at this point in time, the Walton Penner family ownership group is rushing. Now, we don't even know at this point, Kim, who the finalists are. We've had some speculation. There's been some reports that have come out. There's been some changes on Monday. It was announced Sean Payton was going to have an interview on Wednesday initially, and then that was backtracked and said, hey, no, there is no interview on Wednesday for Sean Payton. Nothing's been formalized or finalized in terms of an interview schedule. I think that was a lot of PR and damage control because everything's been coming out of Sean Payton's camp about that. So ultimately, this is going to be, a wild offseason for the Broncos. Once again, this coaching search is definitely a little exhausting, but Greg Penner taking his time, trying to make sure that they hire the right guy that can lead this team for the next decade. So I understand the process there. But as I pointed out in my article, is being too patient, kind of a blessing and a curse. Could it impact the Broncos on maybe losing out on their top candidate? That is a possibility.
Which is so crazy because you would think that if they really did have a candidate at the top of their list, they're probably still talking to them a little bit, kind of giving them a hint there. So it's interesting with the patience because, I mean, obviously there's so many different factors, but it's like, I don't think they would actually miss out because if they really want someone, they have to be talking to them, right? Like directly. And that coach would know, or that candidate would know that there is interest. So it's not like they would just blow them off. I mean, the whole Jim Harbaugh thing was pretty interesting. What was your take on that, right? Because he came out and said, I'm staying at Michigan, and there were some people speculating saying that he assumed Sean Payton would get the Denver Broncos job. So Jim Harbaugh didn't want to be embarrassed, and he just said he would stay at Michigan. Obviously, this is his life we're talking about. This is his career and his place of living and everything. So I don't think that that's really the reason. But what was your take on that whole thing?
I mean, I think when you look at it, part of me was thinking, okay, for Jim Harbaugh, there's been rumblings. I mean, we all know last year he was, wanting the Minnesota job. There was a chance he wanted the Raiders job last year when it came available. But I don't think the NFL interest in him was as significant as maybe his interest was, and maybe jumping back to the NFL. Then it kind of leveraged, okay, a new money deal with Michigan. Same thing here. While Harbaugh has yet to sign like a new money deal with Michigan after declaring that he's going to stay there, I always think that there's maybe an opportunity they circle back on
Yeah.
this, or another team circles back and makes another push at Harbaugh, depending on this hiring cycle. But for me, with Harbaugh kind of bowing out, it kind of told me that he wanted to be the guy, and maybe he didn't get the vibe that he was their first guy initially, right? And maybe it was a process. This is all just speculation on my behalf here, but maybe it was the fact that, okay, he got an interview over Zoom, wanted the job, and they're like, hey, we're going to interview other candidates. Maybe he didn't like that. I mean, I don't know, but yeah, for Harbaugh, I think his heart is at the college game. I just think that, he needs that adrenaline rush. He needs that excitement to be courted, right? Once again, at his old age. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see if it sticks there in Ann Arbor.
No, you could be very spot on with that one. I have heard he's a very interesting human being, and no one really knows what is always going on up there for him. So yes. All right, Cody, we'll move on to the next question here. What has to be done to fix special teams? Is Washington back next year? And if not, are there any other players in the draft, free agency, or already on the team who can impact the return game?
This is a great question. I think with Montreal, Washington, so as we all saw, the Broncos special teams unit, they never really got a chance to get many kickoff returns last year, because obviously teams weren't scoring on the Broncos defense at a high rate. And, times where it's like, let's say the opening of a game where the Broncos are set to receive, or, second half where they're set to receive, it doesn't help when, kickers are punching out of the back of the end zone. It doesn't really give you a chance at setting things up in the kick return game. The punt return game, we did see flashes from Montreal, Washington this past season. It's several big explosive plays, but then we also saw some inconsistencies, not necessarily in his ability to return, but more so in the process of setting up the ability to return. Like, for example, one thing coaches are always emphasizing, especially when you're backed up, let's say, a team's close to midfield and they have to punt. The key is punting teams want to try to pin the ball. They want to land somewhere between on the 15-yard line and bounce to roll towards like the 1 without going in the back of the end zone for a touchback. So often at times, there a coaching emphasis, if it's a high punt, you have to, fair catch, get underneath it, track the football. But if it's high and you know that it's going to go behind you, signify that as if you're going to return it and then run up and go block somebody. Montreal, I felt like sometimes would field the ball. He had a couple of games where he fielded the ball inside the 10-yard line, got tackled right away. And now the Broncos offense has to start, inside their own 10. There were times where, a decision to let the ball bounce and roll cost the Broncos by it rolling to the 1-yard line. And once again, giving the Broncos offense a 99-yard field to have to drive, which we all saw they couldn't do that at all this season. So I think those things with Montreal need tweaking a little bit, some fundamental stuff, but I still think that Montreal is the guy to return. We saw him, he had a couple of drops, a couple of muffs this year, but nothing in my opinion that stands out that says, okay, I'm concerned. I think Montreal Washington has a ton of talent for the Broncos. And I think that with the right coaching, because as we all saw, Jerry Rossberg came in the moment he was the interim guy, as a former special teams coordinator and a guy who knows that game, fired Dwayne Stukes, who was the first year special teams coordinator, and then demoted, kind of benched a little bit, Montreal Washington, so he could learn a little bit. And sometimes you have to go through those tough lessons. I think Montreal's still very well in the mix. Denver could look to bring in some other options, maybe in the draft or free agency, though. But at this point in time, I don't see them necessarily making a move to move on from Montreal.
All right. We'll ditch special teams now. We'll move back to the head coach conversation. The next one. We snuck something in there that wasn't the head coach shenanigans. So yeah, that's, thank you. Thank you so much, Bronco Baines, for that one. But now we've got Dr. Wright 56. Who do you think is the dark horse candidate if Sean Payton is not chosen as the Denver Broncos head coach?
Well, I mean, I feel like definitely we talked about him earlier. I think DeMeco Ryans would be kind of that perfect dark horse candidate. I know a lot of Broncos fans have skepticism about another first-year head coach, but here's the reality of the situation. We look at first-year head coaches last year. We'll take a look at, Brian Daboll in New York. We'll take a look at Doug Peterson. Well, not necessarily like first-time head coach, but obviously the first year as a new head coach of the team. Yeah. That one's a little different. And then you also take a look at Kevin O'Connell. I mean, first-year head coaches for those two organizations, specifically Minnesota and New York, and they made the playoffs. Like they went through, they had their ups and downs as coaches, first-year head coaches, but ultimately, if you have the right leader for the job, and I would say the one thing is like you're not so fixated on being a head coach and calling plays, you're focused on leading the operation. Good things can happen if you are a good leader. You can connect with your players. You can create discipline in that environment. I think that's what kind of paved off for them. DeMeco Ryans, obviously a former NFL player, highly regarded right now around league circles, as potentially, outside of Sean Payton, the hottest coaching candidate in this current cycle right now. Obviously, his team, his defense is in the NFC Championship game this weekend. He is a fantastic leader, and I think that what would maybe lessen the blow if he were the head coach for Denver is if he were to bring on somebody with experience at one of the coordinator positions. So, for example, I think a name that's been floated out is Frank Reich, the former Indianapolis Colts head coach, as a potential offensive coordinator for DeMeco Ryans.
Yeah.
That's the key, is they want to go with maybe a veteran offensive, veteran coach, whether it be offensive coordinator, defense coordinator, whatever you may have, to help out in those situations. So DeMeco is probably the dark horse favorite. And then there's some, momentum building about David Shaw, former head coach for the Stanford Cardinals. And obviously for him, he's had a very successful career there. The last 4 seasons, not so much from a win-loss standpoint, but I think so many people are looking at his record as a head coach the last 4 seasons at Stanford and like, oh, this isn't a good coach. People have to understand how different the college game is in comparison to the NFL. Like Stanford, we already know, has strict enrollment requirements from the academic perspective, NIL deals on top of that. I mean, you have to recruit. It's like Stanford, while they're a prestigious school, you can't compete with Alabama. You can't compete with Georgia, Ohio State when it comes to prospects and talent, especially when you have some, different enrollment and requirements that, may be a challenge for some people. So he's a great coach. He's got a winning record there. He's coached guys like Andrew Luck, Christian McCaffrey. I mean, he has created a lot of avenues for Stanford players to make it to the NFL. And I think that's a huge thing that many people are overlooking in this. David Shaw is a potential sleeper candidate as well.
And it's hard to look at the last few seasons. I mean, Stanford is in San Francisco. The COVID rules and everything going around, the pandemic in San Francisco was very, very different than it was in other places of the country. And so when it comes to recruiting, I'm sure players took that into account as well.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's a different ball game, really, the last few seasons, no pun intended, when it comes to how the world was going and how college football was going and where some of these schools are. So I completely agree with you on that one when it comes to David Shaw. The other thing I just want to touch on before we move on here is the whole first year head coach thing. It's easy to consider that a common denominator when you're looking at some of these guys, but at the end of the day, every single guy that becomes a head coach is going to have a first year, right? I mean, that's just kind of what it is. Right now, if you look at Nathaniel Hackett, do you think a team's going to go and be like, we'll take Nathaniel Hackett because he's not a first-year head coach anymore? No. Like, look at what happened in that first year. So there's so many more things. I agree with you. DeMeco Ryans, I think, would be a fantastic option. Obviously, the defense that he has led on the 49ers this year was incredible. No one can argue with that. And I think that the leadership quality is a huge thing. The respect and the leadership quality is honestly something to look at more so than just being a first-year head coach, because I don't think you can just use that term as a complete decision maker there. So
agreed. You don't want to, you don't want to limit yourself either. And
No.
I don't think that the Walton Penner family ownership group is a big believer in limiting their options. So spot on there. I agree.
Yeah, totally. All right. Last one here. What's the coaching staff that's going to get the Broncos to the playoffs in 2023? Head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. If you could have anyone you wanted, Cody, what's the combo?
That is a very, very interesting turn of events here. I mean, ideally, let's say Denver goes with the route of Sean Payton as the head coach. For me, offensive coordinator, would it be Greg Roman potentially? Would that be an option? Defensive coordinator, would a Giro Evero stay on? Like for me, ideally, I don't know who you would have at the OC position. I'll be very honest with you. There's a lot of names. There's a lot of extenuating circumstances, especially with some other jobs opening up right now. It's so hard to project who the offensive coordinator could be. Sean Payton as the head coach, in my opinion, you have to find a way to preserve that defense. And if Giro Evero is not offered a head coaching job by any of the teams in the cycle, you keep him on as a defensive coordinator because the Broncos defense isn't broken. So why try to fix something that's not broken? And I'd be very intrigued to see what they do at offensive coordinator. To be honest with you, I have no idea who that would be right now if it were Sean Payton's staff. So that's a tough one there from Sarah.
Okay, well, we got 2 out of the 3 for you guys there. Thanks, Cody. No, there's so much going on, and obviously it is hard to think hypothetically when this is actually happening. Like all of 3 of those positions do probably need to be filled. So
many moving pieces.
So many moving pieces. Exactly. And like Cody said, we are filming this in the morning here on Wednesday. So things may change by the time you all tune in this afternoon. But as it stands right now, Wednesday morning, this is what we've got for you. So thank you to everybody tuning in to this Denver Broncos AMA. We will have them weekly over at Mile High Sports. So make sure that you are following Mile High Sports on Twitter, on Instagram. Of course, check our website and make sure you are also following Cody at Cody Rourke NFL so you can see the tweet that he will send out weekly asking what questions you all may have. Cody, I will likely confidently say next time we do this, we'll probably have someone to talk about when it comes to the head coach, but maybe I shouldn't say confidently.
Maybe. I'm just hoping that it's done by the time we have to head to Phoenix for the Super Bowl for Radio Row. Like I said, I don't want to miss the introductory press conference when it happens. So I'm hoping they get this thing done before we leave for the Super Bowl.
No kidding, but how cool you guys will be on Radio Row. That'll be awesome. So yes, make sure that you're also listening to Mile High Sports Radio. We've got stuff everywhere for you guys on all platforms. So thank you to all of our listeners. Cody, thank you, and I'll see you next Wednesday.